Hello and welcome back to the Chattercade podcast, where I discuss media in the forms of discussions and reviews. I'm your host, Dranking Thomas Hughes, and today it's a little different to what technically was planned, because what's technically planned for today's episode has now been pushed back to next week. It's already recorded, it's pretty much ready to go out for today, but then I obviously watched this movie and was like, it makes sense to just put this out now and have the Christmas festive episode out next week when it's obviously Christmas week. So I thought, okay, I'll just postpone it. So when you listen to next week's, when I constantly reference the previous week being the Guardians of the Galaxy special, obviously you'll just know that I mean 2 weeks prior, since I say that was we did a back-to-back recording, myself and Alex did, for Guardians and the Phineas and Ferb Christmas special, which is the one that's coming out next week. And as I say, that was originally meant to be obviously that was last week and it was this week, but as I said, this film kind of made me go, no, you know what, I'm slotting this in the middle because I want to talk about it and I don't really want to wait for this one to go out till next week, because you know it's a brand new movie and I want the movie to be spoken about, you know, close to its original release. And that is Kraven the Hunter, the latest and last for now of the Sony non-Spider-Man but Spider-Man related characters universe, which is referred to as the SMCU. And obviously this universe consists of the 3 Venom movies, so Venom, Venom the Carnage, and Venom The Last Dance. It also consists of the critically panned Morbius and Madam Web. I mean, to be fair, every single one of these entries has been rated rotten on Rotten Tomatoes by critics. The only ones that have had a positive audience response was, of course, the Venom movies, and technically speaking, this one and Morbius, it was just Madam Web that had the negative one. But obviously, I watched this on Sunday. I walked out of the movie, turned around to Hayden and went, personally, this is the worst entry in the SMCU for me. But it's not a total loss. There is some parts of it that are really good. It's just buried and clashing with a lot of it that is bad, which is why I kind of see this movie as a mediocre entry. Like, we both admit it's not bad, but it's not great. There is a lot of bad, but there is a few decent stuff that kind of outweigh it and do drag it into that mediocre territory. But obviously, it's the case of, once again, with these non-Venom, non-Spider-Man universe entries, because obviously, when I say that, I mean Venom being a part of this universe. Everything that's not been Venom has been pretty mediocre to just above average. So this kind of slots in nicely then with these non-Venom entries in this non-Spider-Man universe, because it's never a case of good idea on paper, really good idea on paper, just a really poor execution. Because the story is a fucking mess at times, even more than Madam Web, and that's saying something. Because a lot of people hated that movie because everything about it was just trash in their eyes. As me and Hayden both said afterwards, we both spoke about it and was like, thing is, yes, it was bad, Madam Web. The writing especially was really bad. And the fact that they kind of teased a lot in the, obviously, trailer and obviously the build to it of the spider characters, but they never actually did that much with them, since it was all, say, the past, where that spider stuff was in the future. That had its problems, but I don't know, this for me just feels like the letdown. I was looking forward to this movie. The trailers looked okay enough. I love the character of Kraven, especially after Spider-Man 2. But going into this, and I was sitting there, I was trying to even get invested in it, and the first 8 minutes, obviously, which Sony released on YouTube just before release, because obviously there was the negativeness of the box office total, early box office predictions, were really bad. The early reactions coming out were really bad, and Sony were like, okay, let's put the first 8 minutes on YouTube. I didn't watch it. I kept off watching that. I was like, I'm going to save it for the movie. I'm not going to waste it. And actually, it is really good, the first 8 minutes, and it gets you thinking, am I in for like a really good movie right now? And then it sort of transitions into a 20-minute origin story of Kraven, so when he's a lot younger, but it felt like 20 minutes. I don't know how long it actually is. If it's longer, fuck me. My case in point next makes sense. And obviously it focused on showing him getting attacked by this legendary lion that his dad is there to hunt. And basically he's been getting attacked by this character called Calypso, who gives him this magical potion to basically save his life, but it gives him power, which obviously is a change from the actual Kraven origin story from the comics. Is a lot different here, but there is some level of sameness, i.e. The potion stuff. Like there's some level of that in the actual comics. I think it's all voodoo in the actual comics. But then obviously the movie jumps back into the present, and personally, when I was obviously after I watched it, I was like, it felt like when it came back to the present after like spending this like half hour intro getting it out of the way, it felt like the writers kind of went, shit, we just spent like the first half hour of this movie with flashbacks with the prison stuff. We haven't actually developed a lot of actually the modern day Kraven stuff, and we actually need to get a story going. So it felt like the rest of the movie just went too quick. Like the pacing of it was so much, so quick. It just wasn't good. And one of these movies, you kind of need the pacing to be spot on. And the pacing is just so. It starts off slow, which is fair enough, but then it realizes the slowness is just the flashbacks, not the actual story we're trying to get out, and it just tries to power through as quick as it can, getting you the information you need for the present day stuff, and it just does not work. It's just too quick. It rushes a lot of points across that leaves you unsatisfied with a lot of things. Like, for example, obviously the movie has a plot obviously revolving around the Calypso family passing down obviously this liquid, obviously what Kraven takes, but that's not very flushed out. You get this moment in the flashback where it's slightly explained, obviously, we have this in our family, blah blah blah. I mean, bad acting in that whole scene. It was terrible acting, and it just doesn't like fully go into detail about this potion. It's like a very mysterious thing, which they obviously bring the potion back up later in the movie, because that's the whole reason is after Calypso is trying to find what this is, and it kind of just doesn't do anything with that. So it's just, it's kind of like a plot where he's like, could you just like took that out or just reworked it better? Definitely. Obviously then you got the Rhino stuff. Obviously visually, Rhino's great. I like what they did with the transformation stuff. It was really cool. It was a lot different to obviously what we had with the Amazing Spider-Man 2 Rhino, where it was just the Russian guy in the suit. This time, obviously, it's a gangster who has taken obviously this drug from a guy in America, and it's basically allows him to basically go invulnerable. Problem is, it's hurting him really badly. But obviously, his skin can solidify, and obviously, slowly, if he's not taking his medication, he will become, well, the Rhino. And I think that's really cool. I like what they did with that. And obviously, the showcasing on the idea of his human side is that he's trying to take over the criminal empire in obviously this city in London. But the big issue with this is they don't really do enough for me with the human side of Rhino. He's very weakly written. He's just, the human side is shit, essentially. It's just the actual Rhino side which is the good stuff, because obviously that's when he's like full monster. Case in point, there's a scene where he gets told some like quite bad news, and he looks like he's going to scream out of anger, and he makes this like really weird sound, and it just, I can't even describe the sound. It's just a weird fucking sound. And it's for no reason. Like, you just like scream. If you're gonna scream, don't do this weird like sort of like that, basically. But even fucking worse and like random than that. It's just like, what? And obviously, with the whole him being weakly written in the human side of it, though he's present a lot in this film, it's just, it's not good development on his character, and then obviously they slowly keep teasing the stuff with the Rhino via threats to people and just showcasing what he can do with obviously like a slight portion of this power. Obviously, by the time you actually get to him becoming Rhino, it rushes it really quickly. Like you see, obviously Kraven coming out of nowhere, and then he quickly turns to Rhino. It's just like very rushed into that moment, which just kind of some of the movie of being rushed heavily at times. And obviously, I think the other problem with Rhino is the fact that he's not the only villain in this movie. There's another villain in this film called the Foreigner, who obviously has abilities where if he looks into your eyes, he can freeze time for you, and he can basically do stuff like, for example, if someone points a gun, he can freeze time, walk around you, take the gun out of your hand, and then just shoot you in the back of the head when you unfreeze, like that. So there's a lot of focus on him and showing his powers properly off, and that he could possibly be the actual threat to Kraven. So when obviously his portion of the film's done and you're getting back into the Rhino stuff, you then rush in with the Rhino stuff again. It's just like, maybe you shouldn't have had two villains. Or if you were going to do two villains, make sure Rhino is well written, or possibly the Rhino for majority of the runtime. So it's just, they've got one villain doing the heavy work, which is the Foreigner. He's doing all the fucking like killing and stuff. And you got the Rhino who is being left for the final conflict, which, okay, makes sense. I get the idea of saving the big guns for last. Make it like this big moment when he finally becomes Rhino. You're like, oh, cool. It's just, they rush that ending, so the coolness quickly goes out the window of like, wait, is that it? But I say the Foreigner did obviously overshadow a lot of the limelight and took the time from Rhino's development for being a good villain. As I say, they could have literally just got rid of Rhino and had the Foreigner as the main villain, because as I say, they did a lot of really good stuff with him, and he was a pretty cool character. So you probably could have just eradicated the Rhino and just had him as the villain, the Foreigner. But then it's probably the case of, obviously they're trying to market this movie on, the Rhino's the big villain. So you know, people are going to go, oh shit, I need to watch this, because obviously the big villain is a big Spider-Man villain, and it's the case of, can they redeem the character from what they did with Amazing Spider-Man 2? And to an extent they do, but then at the same time they don't. Like, he's not as cheesy and as annoying as he was in Amazing Spider-Man 2, but it's just a badly written character with a cool concept. The same goes for the Amazing Spider-Man 2 one. They had a really cool mech suit, but the character within that mech suit was just not good. It's the same with this, but I still think to an extent the human side is better than the Amazing Spider-Man 2 one. I think anything can be better than that version of fucking Rhino. But yeah, that's what I've got on my notes here that I wrote down. Obviously, on top of that, in terms of obviously not being utilised properly, you had Russell Crowe in this movie playing obviously Kraven's dad, but despite playing this pivotal role of overshadowing the whole thing, like, you know, being the puppeteer at times for a lot of stuff in this movie, they don't do a massive amount with his character, which is crazy, because fucking Russell Crowe, he's a great actor and he's great in every scene he's in. It's just, they just undercook him and underutilize him in this movie. Like, there's probably, I don't mind him being underutilized if they use him properly when they need him, and they just don't for me personally. I've got a bit in a bit when I'll talk about how I probably would have worked this movie better, and that probably would have worked more for his character. And one other thing, obviously, I'm not 100% certain on this. I did question Hayden, but she didn't clock it like I did. Obviously, I did think I saw a bad ADR moment, which obviously I think I heard people say there's bad ADR in this movie. And there's one moment that I did spot, which I'm not quite certain on if it is, and or if it was just my brain just like trying to understand what the fuck am I watching right now. At the scene where Kraven is getting firebombed from like a chopper above, and he says something like "You gotta be kidding me," but it doesn't look like his mouth moves, and on top of that, the volume of when he says it is a lot lower than when he's normally speaking. So for me, it looks like he's like that. He's just like this, and he carries on speaking, but the mouth obviously is not moving at all. I could be wrong. I need to rewatch that scene just to see if I was right or not. Because I say if that is what it is, they're very clear. There's like, let's make him say something here, and they're through like a very generic sort of line in during post production of like, he's looking up. Instead of just looking up and like running to get away from it, it's like, let's look up and go. That's generic line of, you gotta be kidding me, and then run off. It's like, well, if it is bad ADR and that is what I saw, then why just don't have that line? You don't need that line of dialogue. It works without it. You could have had him, as I say, just look up and run without like saying those lines. But to be fair, even if it's not bad ADR and it was my mind just fucking not spotting the scene, like not fully like picturing the scene correctly, it's still an unnecessary line in the movie. And obviously that bad ADR stuff obviously then goes back to Madam Web, which is something I didn't mention when I spoke about Madam Web in February. I never really mentioned the ADR stuff. I don't remember off the top of my head speaking about it. So that's something with the villain in that was like all the lines were clearly dubbed over afterwards, and it just is very noticeable. But I never fucking mentioned it in the actual review I did before. But obviously I mention it now because of this moment. And then obviously, lastly, my negative side of this movie is obviously the final fight. As I say, with the Rhino stuff, it's very anticlimactic. Despite starting cool, with some really cool like moments, some really cool digital effects in this sequence, it's just over like that, and it's just like, why didn't you drag it out even more? Or if you're gonna do it correctly, have maybe a fight early on that's a bit longer, so then by the time you get to this, it's not as bad being this shorter fight, because you've had all these moments throughout which have covered this fight scene. Which I say, it's just a shame, because the fight is pretty cool. It just needed to be longer than this, like, I think like less than 5 minute sequence. So now I'm going to move into what I see as good and bad. Obviously, the music for this is good and bad. It's it's very generic, but at times it can be pretty cool. It can make a scene pretty cool. And on top of that, CGI. There are moments that do look really cool. I said there's a lot of shots with Rhino that look cool. There's a lot of digital effects throughout. I was when Kraven's doing some shit that look really cool. But then there are quite a few noticeable moments, which I said that puts it in the middle range of negative and positive. Because, for example, like there's a scene where Rhino, his face is turning back humanoid, and you can see his forehead, and the forehead just does not look real. It clearly looks digital, and it just heavily stands out like Connor's forehead. Not sorry, Connor. But you can just tell, and there's like some scenes where like stuff, walls breaking. You can kind of, it just doesn't look like an actual like wall. So it's one of those ones where both music and digital effects, there's good in it, but then there's bad in it. So it just lands in the passable category. So now I'm actually going to talk about some positives of this movie. I'm not going to slag this movie off because there are actually some decent moments in it. For starters, the action. The action is really good in this. It's where the movie's at its best. I'm so happy they let into its 15 rating, or R rating if you're American, because this movie would probably be terrible if it didn't have these brutal kills. Because the movie does have some brutal kills for a comic book movie. Because when Kraven hunts, Kraven truly hunts. So the bloody kills from the trailer are just the tip of the iceberg. I just realised my TV is still on the back there. There's the tip of the iceberg of the action you're going to get into with this movie. So there's like a whole sequence, like the bear trap scene in the trailer. There's a sequence around that's fucking more brutal than that sequence. And that's saying watching someone get bear trapped in the face is brutal, but there's a scene that's even more brutal for a comic book movie. So that's where this movie shines. I say if this didn't have these brutal kills, if it toned it down to get into the 12A category, the one where anyone, pretty much anyone can really go and watch it. If it toned it down to that generic superhero type action, this movie probably would be even worse than what I'm gonna give it. Because that, as I said, that is one of the salvaging factors of this movie is its action. The other, of course, is Aaron Taylor Johnson. He does a really good job with his take on the character of Kraven, because I say it's very different to the comic book Kraven. Yes, there are a few elements that are very similar, but a lot of it is different, and I think he does a really good job with this his take on it. I do like Aaron Taylor Johnson; he's a good actor. Obviously, it's just a shame that despite him being a very big positive, a lot of the other characters in this movie aren't at that level and aren't that well written or well acted. The only ones that stand out for me, obviously, is Kraven's dad, played by Russell Crowe, obviously Kraven himself, and Kraven's brother. I don't know the actor's name off the top of my head, but obviously he plays the character of the Chameleon. And he's really well done. Like, he's probably one of the best characters in this movie in terms of development. Because obviously you're showing very early on that he's a very weak character, but his standout is that he can mimic people's voices. So he's like a pianist, and when he's singing, he can sing like any song and sound like that person. And obviously that slowly develops as the film goes on, for him, showing that he doesn't want to be weak anymore. He wants to be respected like Kraven is. And obviously that gets to the point of eventually when you can do the actual Chameleon proper disguise situation. And that is just really good development. He's probably the best developed character in this movie. So the whole Kraven family themselves are really well done. It's just, as I say, everything else around it just isn't well done, and they could have been put into a better movie. Obviously, the Kraven's powers are also cool. I like how the powers obviously make him very animal-like in terms of being able to hunt. So obviously, like, his eyes will turn more animalistic, and he can like see quite far, and he can basically just use his senses to lock onto stuff a lot more. He's full animal, which obviously I don't know too much about Kraven's comic book counterpart. I just know bits and bobs from the different things I've seen him in, but I don't remember too much of him being like this. Obviously, this is them trying to be like, let's try and make him into sort of this generic superhero type character, and it works for this, really. So I'm not gonna, complain about it too much, because as I said, that when he uses his powers, it is fun to watch. I like when he's pouncing on the walls like an animal. I like when he's tracking like an animal. That is really cool. So obviously, when you get to those points in the movie when he's doing that, the scenes around that are going to be really good. And when he goes full animal, it's terrifying to watch for these people running away as they're just getting ravaged by this guy just destroying them. And obviously, the flashback I mentioned earlier, the 20-minute flashback or whatever fucking length it was, that is also good. It's an interesting take on how to bring Kraven's powers to life. But I do kind of wish they would have probably either worked this flashback differently in terms of length. Like, I feel like they could have cut it down and worked into the film a lot differently than taking up most of the start of this movie with the flashback. Though obviously we got a lot of Russell Crowe at that point, it's just they should have worked it a bit differently into the story rather than just taking up the entirety of the opening sequence with it. Which kind of, as I say, just sum up this movie, that they could have tweaked a lot of the story. Cut away most of the flashback for starters. Since, as I said, they didn't do too much with the serum in terms of trying to explain what it fully was. They could have, let's say, cut most of that out, or even just erased it. Obviously, Hayden said that they probably could have either had it so the lion chose Kraven rather than the serum, or it was like a miracle of nature moment, like obviously nature chose him to be its guardian, since that's what they kind of go in this Kraven. He's like, yeah, he's hunting people, but he's also trying to save animals, which is opposite to the actual Kraven in the comics. So if they're going with that version, obviously what they're doing here, they're kind of just doing it as like a miracle of nature, like nature, as they chose him to be its guardian angel. But, it kind of sounds stupid, but it probably would have worked better than what they did with this. Obviously, personally, I would have liked them to have Rhino as Rhino a lot more in this movie. As I say, but they could have had him as the big top dog controller of this gangster world in London. So they could have had Russell Crowe at the start being in control, but Rhino takes it from him. And then the whole point then is the movie is Kraven's father trying to get Kraven back to him so he can try and push Kraven into going after the Rhino, which is like, there's some of that level of it in the movie, but obviously how I'm looking at it is obviously Kraven's dad being more of down in the ranks compared to where he is in this film, because he's meant to be like one of the top sort of gangsters. They probably should have had him a bit more down the ranks, and Rhino being the top dog because of this Rhino power. He uses that to get what he wants, and obviously his dad realizes, well, I can't fight this fucking guy. It's a rhinoceros. Hey, my son's like a super fucking hero. He can deal with it. Like, I'd say that probably could have worked it a bit better. But obviously they went for the they just didn't bother going for that. Went for something different. But obviously the other way I probably could have they could have done this, which I think both Hayden and I agreed on, was not gone for the anti-hero stuff, gone for a full villain origin story, which then you could have used this character for the MCU, or as I say, just the Venom universe as one of its big villains, because I could have literally had him as this big game trophy hunter. And obviously Rhino's his big first target. And when he gets Rhino, that's when the craving happens. That's when he realizes, I need to obviously go after these people that are more animal-like than human. Because if I can beat them, then I'm the king. I'm the best at this. I'm the hunter. So that's what they could have done. And obviously then he could have been going after characters like Scorpion, Shocker, Black Cat, Vulture. And that list then would eventually lead all the way to the biggest hunt of his life, which would have been Spider-Man, which is when they could have done the Last Hunt storyline, which I know they've spoke about. I think Aaron Taylor Johnson, the director, mentioned that they're on about if they ever did a sequel, which cough they're not, because no way with his box office numbers, which I'm guessing is going to come in, because at the moment they're very low. As of recording, I don't know what they're at when the video goes out, so I'll have to keep an eye on that. Obviously, they're not going to get a sequel, and obviously, I know they mentioned if they did, they would want to the Last Hunt storyline, which would not work with the way they've developed this Kraven. That storyline just wouldn't work. It would have to literally be like a separate fucking movie that just happens to have Aaron Taylor Johnson again as Kraven, because obviously that story showcases him obviously killing Spider-Man, taking the mantle over, and basically going around and hunting people as Spider-Man. That just wouldn't work for this Kraven. You'd have to go full villain if you're going to do that, and that's where they missed out an opportunity. They should have just done a villain movie. No need for this anti-hero stuff that every fucking company likes to do with characters that aren't really heroes. They do it with all of them. I mean, Black Adam did it. I'm not going to slag that film because I really enjoyed that one. They did Suicide Squad to an extent. Obviously, they've been doing it with Venom and Morbius. Obviously, the only one really out of all these that worked was Venom, because Venom in the comics at times is definitely an anti-hero. I mean, at the moment, he pretty much is. Whereas all these other ones, they just don't need it. If you're going to do a film with them, have them be the big villain of the movie. Obviously, have them, they only usually probably work with a hero present. Which is I think Black Adam did work enough, because you had the Justice Society involved, and then you did have a bigger threat, so that one kind of worked. Whereas this, they're fully focusing him as this sort of heroic type character who does bad stuff to get the job done, but he's still kind of being this good guy to an extent. So maybe just get rid of that entirely and just have him this full-fledged trophy hunter. And I say he obviously ends up finding Rhino, and obviously that hunt is what eventually gets him wanting to go after these other heroes and villains that are worthy of a hunt, which, as I say, that's just how I would have worked it, and I think Hayden probably would agree on that. So hopefully Sony finally learns not every character needs to be an anti-hero or a hero like Venom, and maybe they'll learn that not every character deserves a movie unless you actually write an actual good story. Basically, just do everything with a movie good. Then I'd be okay with you doing a movie adaptation of a character that not many people would say, oh, they deserve a movie. Like, for example, obviously that El Muerto movie that's been like sort of development hell for a while. Obviously, as soon as that, I'm pretty sure like, most people are like, what's the point? But if that came out and was really good, then you can say, okay, that's fine. It's a fucking solid movie. I don't think it's probably going to happen there, because obviously the main draw that was Bad Bunny, and he's not doing it anymore. Obviously, you'd be okay with this movie because it's really well done. Whereas, as I say, when it's done badly, and you start to question again, why are you giving a movie to a character that's so obscure that no one, would really want as a movie? Or same with the villains. Do a really good villain movie, obviously, turn into an anti-hero. Do it really well like you did with Venom. People are going, okay, that's fine, let's keep doing this. Whereas when you start putting out ones like Morbius and this one, I'm not going to say Madam Web because she's not a villain. She was never designed as a villain entirely in that movie. She's not, I don't think she's like heavily a villain in the comics. But these two that are at times very villainous, turn them into anti-heroes and doing a bad job with that gets people going, why are you doing that to these characters? Just use them in another movie as the villain, rather than what you're doing. So hopefully they fucking learn. Because I say so far, they've done 4 character movies. They've obviously given 4 characters their own movies. Venom, Morbius, Madam Web, Kraven. Only one was done correctly, and that was the Venom movies. The Venom trilogy was the only ones that actually were worth a fucking fuck. Fucking fuck, yeah. That's exactly. My brain can't even get words out. It just decides to cram fucking multiple times. So yeah, just overall this movie is mediocre and a letdown. And for me, especially after seeing, as I said earlier, Kraven in Spider-Man 2, I was looking forward to enough. So when I actually watched it, and it didn't give me that joy. I was hoping for maybe a 7 out of 10 minimum for this movie, or even like a 6 out of 10 minimum. I'd say that 6 out of 10 minimum, 8 out of 10 maximum. Anything in that region, I was going to be fucking satisfied with this movie enough. But for me, I'm going to be very generous and give it a slap bang 5 out of 10. That's probably me being a little generous, but I do think some of the negatives do counter out. Some of the positives to counter out the negatives enough to, balance it into the middle. So yeah, I might try and do the free Venom movie. I think I'm obviously, if I'll quickly look into 2025 for the podcast. Obviously, I've got the Phineas and Ferb one going out next week, so that's technically 2024. I'm doing a most anticipated media one again. I did it last year, and I'm doing it again this year. I'm also doing obviously my top 10 movies, TV, and video game ones. So that's 2 of the podcasts that you'll be seeing in January. There's 5 going out in January because how many fucking Fridays there are in January. The other 3, I think I'm going to try and do the Venom movies. I'm going to sit through all 3, which would then leave me Morbius, which I have to cover in February. So I'm pretty much going to try and lock that in now. Obviously, if I do have to make any changes, I'll have to change as I go. As I'm starting with the most anticipated at the start of the year. That'll be followed by the top 10. Then it'll be Venom 1, 2, and 3 over the course of 3 weeks, and Morbius will kick off February. Obviously, I don't know it any further than that. I'll probably do more like possibly the Captain America when it comes out, but I'll debate that. But obviously, that's my first 5, 6 technically podcasts of next year. Obviously, in terms of the Golden Cave Awards as well, I'm looking at February for that. That'd be less podcasts this time. That'd be more of an actual, just normal video. So obviously, if you listen to the podcasts and you want to listen, also check out the Golden Cave Awards, our next entry of that. Obviously, you'd have to go onto YouTube for that. Because as I say, I'm going to look at doing that as a proper video. I'm kind of going to try and get Alex and Connor involved. Because obviously, I got Connor involved last time because we both did it on the podcast. But I'm going to try and get Alex involved as well. Because when we did the Chat Cave Awards back in 2020, obviously I had everyone involved and they were all doing the nominations and stuff. And they were sending me the videos and I was just cramming them into a massive video. And I'm gonna try and do that again, but obviously we just the 3 of us. If I can get the others on, great. But at the moment I'm just gonna try and lock in those 3, which I've got a better chance of doing it. Other than that, that's pretty much how early on in January is gonna start in terms of the podcast and podcast related stuff. In terms of obviously gameplay stuff on YouTube, obviously next week, the Christmas week, I'm doing a lot of one-shot stuff, and that'll be going into the following week as well. I've had to make a few changes to what I originally wanted to do. I really wanted to do Kebab Chef, but that kind of went out the window. But that's kind of allowed me to do a few more one-shots, because as I say, I'm going to do the RoboCop game. I'm going to do the South Park game. I'm actually going to be able to do Demon Slayer, which I wasn't originally going to do, but I'm actually going to be able to get that out. I've got some stuff with Alex in the works, obviously 2 videos. And then obviously moving into January, the start, I'm looking at carrying on playing, because obviously I have done a one-shot on the Suicide Squad game that goes out over Christmas, and I'm looking at just trying to bash through the rest of that, and that will be probably the first big game I play of the year. And once I've done that, I'll move back into Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, and I'll move back into Supermarket Together. So it just allows a little break and a little time to actually get the other stuff recorded and edited, rather than just trying to rush stuff out. So yeah, pretty much like covers most of how I want to end this year / start next year. I got most of it pretty much done. I've got a few things I'm going to be doing today, and that would be my December pretty much covered. And it's just working on the early January stuff. So now I've got time to just chill, edit, and just check out some other stuff. Check out stuff off recording. Like I'm playing the Indiana Jones game off recording at the moment. I want to play some more of that. And I've got a few other games I want to play some more of out of recording, which I'll get time to do because I've covered enough for this channel to keep you satisfied until I start recording again during the new year. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that covers it. Obviously, if you've seen Kraven the Hunter, put your thoughts in the comments below. Did you like it? Didn't you like it? What could they have done better? Which, you know, there is a lot they could have done better. And if they were to do any more these characters that are obviously Spider-Man villains, if they're doing more of these movies, what character would you like to see them attempt to try and do? Or will you just be happy with them just ending this franchise overall? But obviously, either way, you can check out the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Audible, etc., etc. I say you can check it out on YouTube, and I say do keep checking on YouTube because there's a lot coming out over Christmas and in the new year. And until then, I hope you enjoyed this episode. And I do hope to see you next week for that Phineas and Ferb video. So until then, hope you enjoyed. Hope to see you next time. Goodbye.
If you like what you've seen, don't be afraid to throw us a little like and subscribe. That's always very appreciated over here. And, well, I'll see you on the next video.